Over the last 3 years, we have read a ton of books, and I've rated a lot of them, almost 50 of them, a 5-star read. So today, we need to figure out, do they stand the test of time? Are they aging like fine wine, or are they aging like cottage cheese? We'll find out. But first we have to talk about my current obsession because these products have literally been getting me through the winter. Now I've talked about Curology before, but if you're not familiar with the company, they're an online skincare company that creates custom prescription products for you that helps with the problems that you let them know about. So all you have to do is go online, take their skincare quiz, and let them know the things that you want to work on. I personally said I wanted to work on preventing wrinkles, also hyperpigmentation, and dry skin because I always get really dry skin in the winter. And I let my skincare professional know. She created these prescriptions for me. They have my name on them. So cute. Can you see? Like this. And then you start using them and see the results. Now, my favorite products by far, I've been using it for a while. My favorite products have to be these two. This is the tretinoin for me, and it's just completely helping not only brighten my skin, but also helping with the hyperpigmentation because I don't get breakouts often, but when I do, they always leave a mark. But this has been coming in clutch, okay? And then this moisturizer is so lightweight, so hydrating. I genuinely didn't think I was gonna like it because I usually like really thick moisturizers, but this little thing is perfect. I use it all the time. I use it in the morning and at night. I love this thing. And if you wanna try any of these products, I highly recommend using the link down below, telling them your skincare issues and getting your prescriptions sent to your home. This is a subscription service, but I absolutely love them and I think you should give them a try. Thank you again, Curology, for sponsoring this portion of the video. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm a bit nervous because a lot of these books I haven't even thought about since the last time I read them, and that's very telling of like the quality of them because I feel like a true 5-star. A 5-star means literally perfect. There's nothing I would change. There's nothing that bothered me or anything. When I think back on these books, I think about them fondly. So do all 50 of these books stand that test of time? I don't know. But here, let me show you the tiers that I made because I'm pretty proud of them. So number 1, this is the creme de la creme. You are a 5-star, probably a 6-star in real life. And that's, you're doing amazing, sweetie. Keep doing what you're doing. You're aging gracefully. You're doing amazing. The tier underneath that is like, you're still really great, but you could be better. And that's PS I love you. I still love you, but you're not here. You know what I'm saying? You're here, but you're not here. Second best is not bad though. Now, the third one, that's my iffy ones. That's like, did it really deserve a 5-star? I don't know. So that's why it's called I'm Just a Girl. I don't know. Like when I finished reading it, I just gave it that star because that's how I was feeling in the end. But looking back, do I feel that way now? Questionable. Now, the tier underneath that, this is like, oh, I'm looking back and now that I've read more books, I know for a fact I still wouldn't rate that a 5-star. And this is, it was in fact a phase. And last and least is I'm embarrassed. I have no idea why I gave this a 5-star. I don't know what I was doing in that time, but looking back, please do not quote me. Please do not read that book, and let's move on. All right, starting strong with And Then There Were None. Looking back unbiasedly, outside of her being racist, that book was just mid. Like honestly, if I can look back unbiasedly, outside of me being upset with her, it was okay. Like it wasn't bad. I think it was more important for its time. But now that there have been so many other books since that book has come out, I've read so many other great thrillers that I'm like, it was okay. So I think I'm gonna put that one in, I'm Just a Girl. But if I was voting with my feelings, it'd be I'm Embarrassed because that original title, what the heck was that? Number 2, Animal Farm. This is a classic that I love. It's probably, no, I think it's tied between this and Lord of the Flies. Those two classics are my favorite classics by far. They're so good. The storytelling is really, really good, and it gets incrementally more serious and suspenseful and terrifying, especially because of its parallels with the real world. So I still love this. You're doing amazing, sweetie. Becoming by Michelle Obama. I think this is one of the first books I started reading when I began reading again. I read this about 3 or 4 years ago. Oh my gosh, I remember when I read this. Okay, I was a lifeguard. I think it was my last year in college. I was a lifeguard and I was reading this book by the pool the entire summer, and it was so good. I loved hearing about her life. I loved hearing about her upbringing. This girl is so smart, so strong, and just so beautiful of a person. It really was so inspiring for me, especially as a Black woman myself. So you're doing amazing. You're aging gracefully, both as a person and as a book. Black Cake. Oh my goodness. Did we read this in 2023? I think we read this in 2023. This book made me cry. It was very good. It's about a family who lost their parent and they're just trying to grieve that process as well as come together again. They learned a lot of secrets about their mother, about their past, about their history. It kind of just helps them mold who they are and kind of find more self-discovery within themselves along with every other member in their family. It was very good. I think this is one of the books that originally got me into literary fiction. I think it's P.S. I Still Love You. It's incredible, but I'm leaving my You're Doing Amazing, Sweetie for the books that still make me like skip a beat. So I'm gonna put this here. Can't Hurt Me. Oh my gosh, I love this book. I love this book so much. I'm so passionate about it. This isn't a fun book. This isn't about anything but real life, pushing yourself to get better. And I remember distinctively reading this when I was like going through a lot mentally, and I just felt like I couldn't do anything. I was kind of second guessing myself a lot. And the way he writes this self-help book, incredible. I think this is the only real self-help book that actually works outside of The Mountain Is You, just because he's so real, so honest. And a lot of the books, a lot of the times now try to baby yourself and make excuses and allow you to keep your excuses, but he does not do all of that. It's like really, really tough love. So if you're not up for that, do not read this book. But if you're really trying to change your life, this is my go-to recommendation every single time. You're Doing Amazing, Sweetie. I never got to read his second book after this though, and that's something I genuinely want to do because he said that's the original book he wanted to write, but he had to give the back information, so that's why he wrote Can't Hurt Me. So if it's anything like this book, I definitely need to read that second book. Okay, the next book is The Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. Now I will say, okay, with the series that are in this tier ranking thing, I always put the first book and only the first book because I'm counting the entire series. If they made it to the 5-star ranking, it's usually the whole series that's good. But because I literally just finished reading both of these books, I had to put them individually because I love them so much, so dear to my heart individually. So that's why they're like that. So I'm gonna start with Six of Crows and why I love that one. Six of Crows literally left my jaw on the floor. I could not believe it. I could not believe how good it was. I usually don't like a book that is high fantasy, so I have to learn the world, and there's a lot of main characters, a lot of moving parts, because it's very hard to follow through. And a lot of authors aren't good at continuing to keep the pieces cohesive throughout the entirety of the book. But this author, she does not play around. She did this so perfectly. My jaw was on the floor the entire time. I was too stunned to speak. You're Doing Amazing, Sweetie. I think this is probably my favorite fantasy series of all time. Then with Crooked Kingdom, I loved this because Six of Crows got us into the base of the story. We are figuring out who these misfits are, the crazy heist that they were trying to accomplish, and the base information of their world. Now with Crooked Kingdom, she gave us the icing, the decoration, the real backstory of these characters. They grew and developed so much together. It felt like a family. It felt like you were a fly on the wall of a family, and it was so hard to leave this world. I still can't believe it's only a duology. I could have 6 or 7 more books of this. Like, if the writing stays that good, if the storyline stays that good, I can read this for the rest of my life. So I'm so heartbroken that it's only 2 books, but I absolutely love the entire ride. Crooked Kingdom is still top of the top. You're Doing Amazing, Sweetie. Now Dark Matter. This is also a book that we read this year as well. I think it was my first book of 2025 actually. Yes, it was. It was my first book, and my first book by this author, Blake Crouch. And this is a science fiction, not necessarily fantasy, but it takes ideas and concepts from science in today's world, and he used a lot of his own creative liberties to make the story, and I really enjoyed it. His storytelling is really good. It's very fast paced. I loved hearing him face these impossible scenarios, and him as a human being, but an intellectual trying to make it through those situations. It was so fun, especially because I'm a science person. Maybe if you're not a science person, you might not appreciate it as much, but the writing was so complex but clear that even if you're not a science person and you like science fiction, you will definitely fall in love with this book. I still haven't watched the show yet. I'm still so mad at myself. I just have so much going on, but that is one thing I have to do before the end of this year. This is still You're Doing Amazing, Sweetie. Educated. Oh my gosh, this is a memoir by Tara Westover. I read this either at the beginning of 2024 or the end of 2023. I genuinely can't remember, but I remember my jaw being on the floor. This woman has had such a hard and difficult life. She was born into a family that was very abnormal. They had their own ideologies and it was almost cult-like, and she not only discovered the inaccuracies of the way that they were living, but she also broke away from it, and it was very difficult for her. She explained her entire process, her thinking, what kind of scars it left for her. And despite all of that, never going to high school, everything, and it says that on the back, so I'm not giving you any information, she still was able to become this incredibly educated person, not only like in the books educated, but also through life. And her story is so unbelievably inspiring and just awe-invoking, and I highly recommend that anyone read this. I believe this is still standing the test of time, yeah. But to be honest, I don't think about it that much. Now that I'm really considering it, I don't think about it too often. Every time I see it on my bookshelf, I'm like, oh, that was a good story. But I don't think about it too often, so I'm gonna say, P.S. I still love you. Okay, do we even need to take time on this one? Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine, will always be my book standard. For a long time, it's been my #1 book, and I still think it's my #1 book. I feel like maybe not this year, but next year, we should reread it to see if it stands the test of time. But based on my feelings, you're doing amazing, sweetie. You're doing probably the best out of everybody. This is another literary fiction, and it follows a girl who had such a traumatic childhood. And maybe I'm a little biased because I felt like I related a lot to her. Like, I didn't think anyone else thought the way that I did, and it was refreshing and reassuring that, you know, I'm not the only person. And not only that, she gave us the issue, the author gave us the issue, but at the end of the book, she also gave us a solution, and not a lot of books do that, and I really appreciated that. Even though it's hard topics, she writes in such a funny way. I love dry humor, so there's a lot of dry humor in it. She writes in such a funny way that even though the topic can be very uncomfortable, she gives it to you and presents it to you in such a fun way that it's like manageable. And it's not something that's gonna constantly make you cry. You will cry, but it's not gonna be a constant, like, sad, heavy feeling throughout the entire book, which I love. I love balancing both of those feelings. Then Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. I read this book last year, and I still think about this like once a week at least. I love this woman. I love the way that she writes. This is a memoir about her life, how she was just trying to figure out what love meant, not only in a platonic sense, but also familial and romantic, and what it meant for herself, like self-love. And she went through this crazy ride. You start when she was a child all the way to where she is now, and she writes in a way where it's not her looking back on her life, it's her in that moment. I'm a teenager, this is what I think about love. I'm in college, and this is what I think about love. My opinions are facts in my life, and let me present them to you. And I love that she presented the book and her knowledge in that way, because you got to grow with her. You got to see the mistakes in real time, it felt like, and grow with her as she was growing. And that was so cool, because it felt even more profound, at least to me, by the end of it, because we could see how far she came. Like, the first sentence of the book is wild. Compared to the end of the book, incredible growth. So I absolutely love this. And I also really like this memoir because it's super fun, super funny, super witty. Yes, there's heavy topics in it, but she keeps it light as well. And not only that, anytime she goes through something traumatic, she gives you a recipe. She likes to cook. So at the end of the chapter, there'll be a recipe. And I just love that. Like, she's just putting in a bunch of her personality. And that's why this book is so unique, so unlike any other memoir. And I love books where you can see a lot of the author in it, and she did that perfectly. This is still the top of the top. Funny story. Oh my God, there's barely anything bad. I'm really loving this though, because that means that we're pretty cohesive with our opinions. But funny story, we read this last year, so I still feel very good about it. I loved the audiobook. I think this year, maybe at the end of this year, because we got to get some new books in, maybe at the end of this year, I really want to reread it. Every time I look at the book, I'm like, oh my God, I need to read it. It's literally right here. And every time I look at her, I'm like, what if I just, you know what I mean? And I know that I can't because we have so many books on our TBR, but I think about Miles often. You're doing amazing, sweetie. In my mind, they're doing incredible. Okay, Harry Potter. So again, I only put the first book because there's so many books in this series. This is a series that I read for the first time last year, last February, and I documented that for you guys. I went on a wild ride because I had never watched any of the Harry Potter movies. I had never read any of the books. I didn't know anything about it. I was probably one of the few people in the world who had no idea about this entire world. And oh my goodness, did it stand the test of time. This book was written in the 90s. And I had such a wonderful time in 2024. I watched the movies now. For Christmas, my Christmas gift to myself was watching all of the movies. So that's how much I love it. I think that the books are obviously better than the movies, but the movies are super cute, and it allows me to enter into that world again without spending months of my time reading the books again. But I think about Harry often. I love Ron. Ron is my favorite character, and this is going to age well, I can tell. Okay, Human Acts. Oh, when did I read this? I think we read this in 2023. This was very, very good. I don't think about it too often, but it was a beautiful way to write about Korean history. It was about a war, and it talks about the war from a victim's perspective, and you just go through his life, and it's so heartbreaking, but it's so informative. It allows you to be empathetic. It allows you to grow as a person and be more worldly. At least for me, I didn't even know about this war, and she taught me a lot. And after reading this book, I did more research on it, and I was just dumbfounded. I really love books that make me feel uncomfortable in the name of education. So this is still P.S. I Still Love You, for sure. Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. This book, oh my gosh, I remember sobbing reading this, but I haven't read this since, oh, I'm about to age myself bad. I think I read this in 2013. Yeah, I read this in high school for my English class, and it broke me. I could not believe it. It was so sad, so unfortunately real and relatable, especially if you're a minority, especially if you're a Black woman in America. She holds nothing back. That's what I love about Maya Angelou. She fights for our voice, and she always gives you the uncomfortable truths of the world, and I really appreciate that. I don't know if I had the stomach for it when I was in high school, but I'm glad that I read it then because it made me more informed. It made me want to be more informed, and it allowed me to go down that rabbit hole with not only her writing as well as Toni Morrison's writing. So I think with this one, you're doing amazing, sweetie. I don't think about it too often though, and that's really bad. I think I'm gonna put this in P.S. I Still Love You, but I definitely need to go on a classics like run for a while and try to get back into that headspace. Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died. This was so good. I didn't read the physical book. I bought the audiobook, and wow, I loved the audiobook, by the way. If you haven't read this yet, I highly recommend reading it with the audiobook because she's narrating it herself. So you get her voice, her emotions, everything like that. And if you're not familiar with the story, this is a memoir from the girl from iCarly. I used to love iCarly, by the way. I grew up on iCarly. It was my favorite show. It's actually the show that made me want to be a YouTuber. So I thought they lived perfect lives. I thought she was so inspiring. I wanted to be her. Everyone wanted to be her. And then to read this years later to see that she was fighting demons on a daily basis was so eye-opening and so heartbreaking. And not only does it shed a light on the entertainment industry for children, but it also shows a light on like parental abuse and emotional and physical trauma that you go through with that type of lifestyle. So it was very informative, very good, very heartbreaking, but she wrote it so well. I loved this. I thought it was incredible. I think you're doing amazing, sweetie, because I do still think about this one. Kim Jiyoung, born 1982. I read this, I'm pretty sure, 2023. This was very good. It's very short. This is another book by a Korean author, and it talks about a woman who kind of falls into psychosis after having her child and how her voice is kind of ignored in this man's world, and it was very enlightening. I really enjoyed it. I think this is still P.S. I Still Love You. I think I should go back to it because I remember feeling the female rage when I was reading this, but I don't think about this too often, unfortunately. Ooh, okay, Love and Other Words. Come on now. We already know this is my favorite romance. This and Funny Story are neck and neck, tied for my favorite romance. I don't even have to say much. You're doing amazing, sweetie. You're aging perfectly. And I read that one in 2023, I'm pretty sure. And, oh my gosh, I remember. I read this at the end of a 24-hour reading vlog. I read for 24 hours straight. I finished this book, and I remember at the end of that 24-hour reading vlog, I told y'all, I'm gonna go to bed. I'm so tired. Tell me why I stayed up an extra hour and a half just to finish that book, because it was that good. And then I went to bed for like 10 hours. Like, that's how good that book is. It still stands the test of time. That's the type of love I want. If anyone's listening up there, this is your manual. Here, play by play, please. Legendborn. Oh, we read this last year in my book club, in my Patreon book club. Also, if you haven't joined my book club already, make sure you join down below. The link's down below. We have a really good time there. We are currently reading The Neighbor Favor, and it's so good. I love a good romance. I love a good like giggling and kicking your feet fest, especially when you're reading it with your friends. And there's a bunch of girls in our book club, and it's just such a fun time. So we read this last year, and this was so good. First of all, we have a Black main character. It's high fantasy, and there's romance. Like, the trifecta here. It was so good. And the writing. Can we have a moment of silence for the writing? The writing was absolutely incredible. It was my first book by Tracy Deonn, and it will not be my last. I also have the second book. I just got it, I think, in our last bookstore vlog. It's Blood Marks, but I also need Oathbound. I think that's the third book in the series. Absolutely incredible. I really enjoyed it. It was very hard to follow at first, but I took a step back and I did a little bit of research to try to figure out the hierarchy and the magic system. And once I did that, I was fully into the story. I absolutely loved it. So if you're reading it and you feel a little bit confused, a little overwhelmed, I always recommend giving in a little effort and trying to do the research and then going back to the book, because it's always worth it when it's a good book. And this is a great book. You're doing amazing, sweetie. Lord of the Flies. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. This is my other favorite classic. This book scared me so bad. It scared me because it was really interesting to see how you're just following this group of kids who got lost. They're stranded on an island. You're hoping for the best, and you watch them slowly descend into madness, absolute chaos. And you don't think it can get worse, and then it gets worse. And the way that it's written so clearly, and it follows a step-by-step thing, and it's just continuously going downhill. And for some reason, the way that it was written was really chilling for me, but like in the best way. I enjoyed my time reading this, and it really made me look at human nature and how we act as humans and things that we care about, how society is just a concept basically, and how we always descend back to our nature, I guess. It was very scary, very eerie, and made me think a lot. I think about this book all the time. You're doing amazing, sweetie. Oh my gosh, we're more than halfway done, and I haven't put a single book past I'm Just a Girl. I'm proud of us. That means we continue to have the same taste throughout the years, which is really cool. At least I know what kind of books I like. Okay, Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Ooh, I don't remember what year I read this, but I remember being devastated. This book was a 5-star for me because it hit a little too close to home. It followed these siblings who didn't have a good relationship with their father, and they were just trying to grow as a person and deal with their own emotional traumas. It was so good. I love Taylor Jenkins Reid, by the way. She's a really good writer. She was one of the first authors that I started reading when I started rereading again, and her writing was the perfect catalyst to get me back into my love for reading. And this was one of the first ones, and wow, this was so good. I think personally, if I can just take a step back from my own life, I think this would probably be like a 4-star if I wasn't so emotionally connected to it personally, just because there were some things where I was like, oh, okay. But the messaging behind it is what made it a 5-star for me. So I literally never think about this book, never think about it once. The only reason why I thought about it now is because it's here, and I went through my Goodreads and saw that it was a 5-star, saw that I rated a 5-star. So with that in mind, I don't think I can put it in the top tier, but I remember being so highly affected by it and really doing some introspection after this. So I think I'm gonna put P.S. I Still Love You. But now that I'm thinking hold on. But now that I'm thinking about it, I really didn't like everything in the story. And I remember being pissed off too. I remember telling y'all I was pissed off because there were certain things that happened. I think I'm gonna put this in I'm Just a Girl. Yeah, I think that's the best. Red Rising. I literally just read this not too long ago, so it's still fresh in my mind. And I'm also on the second book, and the second book, absolutely incredible. I already know it's going to be a 5-star, and I'm only on the 11th chapter. This is so good. The writing is incredible. This is my first real big girl high fantasy series, and this is a 6-book series, so I'm a little scared, but I'm having such a great time. Again, I read this with my book club last month in February, and we had such a ball dissecting this, trying to see the parallels in the real world, and this story here was so fun. A little scary because there were a lot of parallels, but it was still so fun. The writing so fun. There's a lot of violence, there's a lot of plot twist and plot development, character development, and I love stories like that. And I love that this book is so high fantasy. It's nothing like the world, except for the fact that the basis of humanity and our ideology is the same. Everything else is completely different, which I love. I love stepping out of the world and being in a completely new world, and this gives that. I will say though, just like Legendborn, you have to really take a second to understand what's going on, because he just throws you in the story. He doesn't give you any backstory, and he lets you learn along the way, which I usually love. But because this is so different, so other, I was a little confused at first, and a lot of the girls in our book club was a little confused at first as well. But then we dissected a few things, things, try to figure out the hierarchy, what the colors meant, what his lifestyle was and why it was that. And after that, after we had a few good discussions about it, we were pretty solid, which was perfect because the rest of the book was absolutely incredible after that. So I highly recommend this book. But again, if you're a little confused, just take the time to do a little bit of research. You're doing amazing, sweetie. Wow, we're doing so good. I was genuinely afraid a lot of these books would not stand the test of time, but now that we're going through each one of them, I'm very happy with how we rated them and how I still feel about them. Salem's Lot. Ooh, okay. We went on like a little Stephen King binge last fall and I had such a great time. This was very scary, but long. If I'm thinking about it, it literally took 400 pages for it to stop being slow and then everything started happening. But that's a long time. That's a long time to wait. It's like you're going up a roller coaster for like 3 days and then it finally drops. But it's because he has to have so much character development, so much world development, so much suspense because he's always trying to scare you. And it's very hard to do that with words on a page. And so he builds the suspense over time. He takes his time. He takes his time with this one. But then I do appreciate that because when we finally get over that hill, it's terrifying, like literally terrifying. I remember being so scared after reading this. With both of those things in mind, I don't know if I still feel like it's a perfect 5-star because again, 5-star means perfect. I don't know if it's a perfect 5-star, but I know that I had a wonderful time reading this. But I will say, I think I enjoyed Misery more than this, and Misery was a little bit shorter, a lot scarier, but in a different sense because this is about vampires. So I think I'm gonna put this one in P.S. I Still Love You. Song of Achilles. This absolutely was one of the first books that I started reading when we started this booktube journey, and I literally still think about this book. I think I literally just made a short talking about how I still think about this book. The way this crushed my soul, the way she took my heart, ripped it out, and played with it a little bit and then threw it, like, oh my God. Wow. I think there are a few things that are going on here in my memory. This is one of the first books that I started reading, so I didn't have much of a reference before this. So I still feel like I should read this maybe a few years from now just to see if it still stands the test of time. But based on my feelings, based on my memory, I remember being devastated. Like the word devastated. I felt like I lost somebody dear to me. Like I was like, no way, I just read this from a book. And I remember I just read this. I didn't listen to any music. I didn't even know that I liked listening to lo-fi while I read. I didn't listen to the audiobook. I was just raw dogging this book and it broke me. So with that in mind, with my memories in mind, I don't know if the writing still stands the test of time because I read this about 3 years ago. But if I have to go off my feelings, it is a perfect, probably 6-star read. It was so good. I still think about this often. So I'm gonna go with that. Song of Solomon. Oh, this was my first Toni Morrison book and this was hard. It wasn't as bad as Bluest Eye, I feel like, but again, this is a book that I started reading in high school. I read this in my literature class and he was very big on classics, very big on expanding our minds, and I really appreciate that because I don't think I ever would have gotten into classics if it weren't for teachers like that pushing me to do so. But I remember this hurt me bad. Like I was crying. I didn't want to talk to anybody because when I read, I really get into the story, and whatever the story is making me feel becomes my personality until I finish the book. And this just had me in my feels, like really bad. So thinking about that, I will have to consider how I'm going to rate this just because I don't think about this book at all. But again, I read this probably 10 years ago. So I don't think it's the book's fault. I think it's just my memory's fault. But I remember having a very like visceral reaction to it. And I wanted to read more from her. I wanted to be more educated, and it forced me and pushed me and motivated me to want to read more. So with that in mind, I think I'm just going to put it in P.S. I Still Love You. Strange Sally Diamond. Ooh, again, I did read this with my book club. I think this may have been our first book club book, if I remember correctly, because I started book club in August last year, and I'm pretty sure this was our first book. This was a wild ride. If you read this, please make sure you check the trigger warnings because it has about everything in it. It is crazy. And the story, the way that it develops was absolutely a wild ride. I think this would be such a fun book club book because it makes you feel everything. It makes you question everything. And it follows the life of this woman who's not like anybody else. She doesn't really have good social cues and social understanding, but she's good-hearted and she's good-natured. And she doesn't remember anything from her childhood until something in her life forces her and triggers her to remember everything. And you follow her discovering who she is, what she's been through, through and how it affects her current life, how it has affected why she is the way that she is. And from there, you get to see her character development and how she grows and evolves from that. And that is like the very tip of the iceberg. If you think that sounds boring, please consider reading it, because it is so much more than that. So much more than that. But I don't want to give spoilers. So with that in mind, I thought the book was perfect until the end. I didn't like how she ended it. I felt like it was a bit of a cop-out, and maybe it was just a rush of a thing. So with that, I think I'm gonna say I'm Just a Girl. I don't know if I still love you. I feel like that's a little strong to say, just because of the topic matter, but the writing was good enough. But the fact that I'm questioning it makes me feel like it has to be a little bit lower. So I will put this in I'm Just a Girl. Okay, we're doing good, y'all. I can't believe none of these have like fallen past I'm Just a Girl, or just like an average, okay, you're still 5 stars. Like, that's pretty good. I'm really proud of us. The Bluest Eye. Now, this one had me questioning everything. I did not expect this book to be so difficult to read. I didn't expect this to really break me and really start thinking about life, really start thinking about what she meant by certain things in this story. And she holds no bar. Like, she will put anything in the book for honesty, for chasing truth and justice, and the lack of justice, and why there is a lack of justice in the Black community. And this book was so hard to read, but this is one of the books that really like changed my life, because it made me want to be more literate. So I think I'm gonna put this in P.S. I Still Love You. Oh, now that we're thinking about this, I really want to go into a classics era. I know it's going to be difficult, but if I continue to read like other happy and fluffy books around that so I can keep my mood up, I think that would be a great journey to go on. So maybe towards the end of the year, we might do that. Then we have The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Now, I believe this is the first book I started reading when I started doing YouTube. So this is really cool. I remember being shook, and the ending left my jaw on the floor. But again, it was one of the very first books that I read, so I don't know if it stands the test of time. So based on my feelings, I'm gonna put this in P.S. I Still Love You. I don't think about it too often, but it still does come up from time to time. The Couple Next Door. I read this last year. It was super fast paced, so good. I really enjoyed this book. But then I did read another book by her and I did not like it at all. So I don't know how she is as an author, but for this one, she outdid herself. I thought the story was so good. It was so fast paced. I'm pretty sure I finished it in a day just because it was so incredible. There were so many twists and turns. I genuinely did not see where it was going, and I ate it up. It was incredible. So this is You're Doing Amazing, Sweetie. I think I still think about this, yeah. The Hunger Games. Oh my gosh, this is a classic, obviously. It's a modern day classic. I love this series. I never read the last book that just came out recently though, and I haven't watched the movie, so I really need to do that. I just don't have the time. So many books, not enough time. We already know the story, but this was really good. I'm gonna count this first book for the entire series. I remember the exact moment I read this book. I lived in Georgia at the time. I was a freshman in high school, and I was going through my whole I'm not like anybody else phase, and I read this whole series. I used to get in trouble because I would bring my book to the dinner table and I literally would never talk to anybody. I couldn't put my book down, and I would get in trouble for not putting my book down, or like staying up past my bedtime and reading it because I had like a little flashlight and I'd be under my covers. I got caught so many times. Like, my thing was I would always get in trouble for reading. My brothers always got in trouble for playing their video games. So I remember so many instances when I got in trouble because I kept reading. I could not put this series down. It was this series as well as Twilight. It was that era for me. So I have such fond memories of this series, plus the writing is incredible. So this is You're Doing Amazing, Sweetie. This is definitely a series I do want to reread though. I feel like we should do a rereading series of this like very soon. Maybe not this year, just because again, Red Rising is a 6-book series and I want to read this year, but maybe next year we do that. The Joy Luck Club. This was my first 6-star read of last year, 2024, and yeah, I absolutely love that. It broke me. It's a very sad book, but it's a very good book and a very necessary book. This follows the lives of 4 Chinese women who escaped war. They live in California. They just came from China, and you see them grow up as people here in this foreign country, and they're trying to raise their Chinese American daughters, but they butt heads a lot, and you get to see their backstory as well as their daughters' perspectives. And it's a really beautiful, enlightening story about family, about tragedy, about culture, and it's just so wonderful if you're a minority And especially if you're not a minority, just so you can be a little bit more empathetic, I highly recommend reading this book just because it's so enlightening. I remember like really contemplating everything after every chapter, like what I just read. It was just so profound to me. It was so good. I remember it being so good. I highly recommend this one. I genuinely think about this one often, for sure. This is a book you can definitely read again and get some new knowledge from it. The Mountain Is You. Now, this is a book that I discovered from last year. It's a self-help book, but it's more than a self-help book. It's about trying to get out of self-sabotage if that's something that you're dealing with. And it's self-sabotage from every angle. If it's finance, relationships, family, your own perspective of yourself, like everything. She covers everything. She's so unbelievably thorough. And not only is she thorough about like fleshing out what your self-sabotaging habits are, but she also gives solutions. I love books that give solutions, that give you advice, like real tangible advice, like real concrete advice. And she does that so perfectly. I usually listen to it every single day. Sometimes I miss them just because I've listened to it at least 10 times through all the way now, but it's very, very good. I listen to the audiobook literally daily. This book has definitely like been the most influential book, I think. It's definitely changed my life. Like, yes, I love Can't Hurt Me, but again, that's very extreme tough love. And this is tough love, but like with a little forehead kiss. You know what I mean? It's a little softer. I can take it a little bit more. The Polar Express. Okay, this book, I know it's a children's book, but it's very near and dear to my heart. This is a book that I read a lot as a child. And then when the movie came out, it was my all-time favorite movie for at least 10 years. But then Interstellar came out and now that's my favorite movie. But with this, because Christmas is my all-time favorite holiday, the movie was so perfect. I loved the movie. I loved the story. And I watched this when I was a child. And I just watched it every single Christmas after that. So this is near and dear to my heart. This is like a part of who I am. So this will obviously go into You're Doing Amazing, Sweetie. I don't know if the actual writing is that good. It's literally a children's book, but the story is, and I'm gonna stick to it. Whew, we're almost done. Y'all tired of me yapping? Cause mouth getting a little dry. The 7-Year Slip. Oh my gosh, this was so good. So If Funny Story and Love in Other Words is here and tied for my favorite romance of all time, I feel like The 7-Year Slip is either second or third place. It's very close. I loved this book. I listened to the audiobook and I highly recommend that because the voice actor, she does the country accent and the southern accent of the guy, of the male main character. And oh, there's something about a southern accent for me. I don't know, maybe it's because of how I was raised, but it just did a little something for me. Plus the story was incredible. It talks about grief. Plus there's a little bit of magic in it. So it's very cool. It's about a woman who lives in New York City and she's going through a lot right now. And she inherits her aunt's old apartment, her old New York City apartment. And when she gets the apartment, she realizes that it takes her 7 years back into the past. And from that past, she meets someone that she falls in love with. And it's just really beautiful to see because you see him in the past and then you also see him in her future. And then they have to decide if their love is something that can stand the test of time. And it's just so beautiful. Plus it talks a lot about self-growth, a lot about grief, and I just love those two things. Plus it talks a lot about food and places in New York City, so I love that extra detail. I love when someone is so passionate about something and they give all of those like very descriptive wording and messages that makes you feel like you're right in the story, that you can taste the foods, the dishes that they're talking about, and I just love that extra element. I was very surprised by that. I didn't expect that in the love story, and it was just so well done. I highly recommend this one, and it still stands the test of time for me. The Sun Is Also a Star. Now, I love Nicole Yoon. She can write a really good romance. I read everything. I actually think I've read every single one of her romance books. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I just didn't read that other book she wrote, which was like more of a thriller. I didn't read that because I heard it wasn't that good, but her romances are great. I remember really liking this, but I never liked the movie adaptations of her books. And now that I'm thinking about this one, I thought it was okay, but it was a little bit more insta-lovey than I would have liked. They literally fell in love in one day. And I'm like, really? I don't know. So thinking about that now, the fact that I don't think about this book at all, but I loved her writing, I loved the story, I'm gonna put this in I'm Just a Girl. The House in the Cerulean Sea. Now, this book definitely made me cry towards the end. Now, the beginning was a little bit slower, but I enjoyed it because we got to understand the main character a little bit more. He's very to himself, doesn't really talk to anyone. He clocks in, clocks out, doesn't have much of a life until he is assigned to a house with a bunch of magical special children. And he quickly discovers that they're actually wonderful children. And it's really a book about not judging a book by its cover, being more inclusive and loving everyone for their differences and things like that. And it was just a really heartwarming, beautiful book. So I think this is P.S. I Still Love You. The Hot Zone. Okay, this is a book that first got me into science. The book was incredible. It's not necessarily sci-fi, if I can remember correctly. No, it's not sci-fi. It's about the Ebola outbreak, and it follows these doctors and scientists trying to find a solution, a vaccine for it, and it was just so well done. I was in freshman year biology when I read this book, and it changed my life. So personally, this is still You're Doing Amazing, Sweetie, but I literally haven't read this in like 15 years. Oh my God, I'm old. Jesus. That's so crazy. Oh my gosh, that's so scary. Wow, jump scare. Anyway, The Little Prince. I love this story. I love this story because the movie made it make more sense to me, and I read the book a few times. The book is very small, but it's very mighty, and I think that this one is still, P.S. I Still Love You, for sure. The Silent Patient. Ooh. This is more of a psychological thriller that really got me because the ending was something I did not expect. And it follows a psychologist who's trying to help another patient who has been through a lot, but she will not talk. She hasn't talked in years, and he is trying to get her to talk, and it follows that story. And it follows him trying to help her like a functioning human in society after she killed her husband. She murdered her husband. And it tells you that on the back. I'm not giving you any spoilers, but it's absolutely insane. It's so insane psychologically. I had never read a psychological thriller like this before, and that's why it was so profound. So for me, I'm gonna put this in P.S. I Still Love You because I just remember having such a crazy reaction to it. Tuesdays with Morrie. We read this last year and it's so heartwarming. I really enjoy it. P.S. I Still Love You for sure. Gives you a lot of good life lessons. Ooh, Twilight. Twilight has my heart. Twilight is where my lore originated from. But are the books good? If I have to be honest, if you're making me be honest, good is a stretch. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. But at the time, when I read this in high school, it was a literary masterpiece. I felt like I discovered Beethoven myself. It was so good. And then the movies were coming out at the same time. Like I was gone. Like I was completely in this world to the max. I was the biggest fan ever. So with that in mind, you have to forgive me. Okay, if I can only think about the book. Okay, I can't think about the movies. I can't think about what this actually means to me. If I'm just looking at the writing, outside of my feral obsession with this series, the writing is not that, it hurts. It like physically hurts me to say this, but the writing is not that great. So I'm gonna put this in I'm Just a Girl. But just know Twilight, the series, the movies, the experience, the era, top tier, 6-star, 6 out of 5 star. You're Doing Amazing, Sweetie. You'll never age for me, okay? But if we're talking about the writing, I gotta be honest. All right, we're on the last two. What Moves the Dead? I love this story. It was so good. I really enjoyed it. But I will say there were some like plot holes, and someone mentioned that to me before, how like the characters weren't as developed as they wished that they were. And thinking about that and thinking about it critically, yes, I would agree, but I really enjoyed the story. I loved the creepy crawliness of it, and I would still rate it like a 4.5 or 5 star. But because of those other issues, I understand why it wouldn't be like perfect. So I'm gonna put this in P.S. I Still Love You. Last but not least, When in Rome. This is the best slow burn romance I have ever read in my life. I still think about it. I still get like giggly about it, kick my feet, everything. This was so cute, so adorable, no spice whatsoever, and yet you feel the sexual tension. She does that so perfectly. I love authors who don't rely on crazy, ridiculous smut just to push the story along because they don't have any other good writing. And I feel like that is a crutch to a lot of people, especially in this time now. So the fact that she had no spice and I was still feral for this story, incredible. You're Doing Amazing, Sweetie. Wow, we did so much better than I originally thought. I genuinely thought we were gonna have some I'm embarrassed, but absolutely zero. No books were a phase, nothing. I'm very proud of this. I'm very happy with this. Now, if we do this 5 years from now, there might be some stragglers down there, but as of right now, I can live with this. Let me know if you would have changed any of the rating of any of these books. Let me know if you agree with my ratings, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Please continue to like and subscribe. I love you mucho, and I'll see you next time. Bye.